The mob in the media are nothing more than an arm of the Democratic Party, reciting the same talking points, repeating the same fake news narratives, and living in the same echo chamber. But the good news is, you get the final say, because in 74 days, we will vote in the most important choice election of our lifetime, and you have the opportunity to shock the world again. This is the Obama-Biden administration was not so long ago. We know what they did. We know what a disaster it was. Biden's been in for 47 years in government. We know the difference Donald Trump has brought forward. We know what's happened now with China and the China virus. Charlie, do you really think that the American people can be gaslit in this way, that they don't want answers or don't want specifics? How long can Joe Biden get away with this?
Yeah, I have a real hard time thinking that the American voters are not on to this. Voters are very smart. They're much smarter than I think Washington politicians ever give them credit for being. It's a real strange little gambit that Joe Biden is trying to play here. On the one hand, he's talking about how racist America is, how awful America is, how unfair America is. And then on the other hand, he has to acknowledge, which you just pointed out, which is that he's been part of the problem in Washington for 47 years. And if America is this horrible place, he's never done anything to fix any of it. And 8 of those years, he was the #2 guy in the White House. So whatever it is that he's attacking Donald Trump for, he has to take some credit for that himself, which is why really all of this is just political. It's all nonsense. You know, when Barack Obama on the night that he spoke said that when he blamed Donald Trump for 170,000 deaths in America because of the Wuhan plague, I thought to myself, wow, Barack Obama doesn't want Joe Biden to win, because you would never say that if you wanted a politician to win. And then Joe Biden turns around and says it himself. It's such a nasty line of attack, and it's so hopeless, and it's so dishonest. And I think the American people realize that. In fact, there's no doubt in my mind that the American people realize how dishonest that is.
Now, let me start, actually, Austin, with you. You know, I've heard Barack Obama make specific statements that what is happening now, and even in violence that was occurring during his administration, was not the way to go, that this was not acceptable, that things had to be done differently. And yet, not only at the convention, but in general, we have not heard leading Democrats in the party condemn what's been going on, except for that little bit about defunding the police, when the messaging prior to that had been the opposite. Are they realizing now it's a bigger problem than they thought? Are they looking at polls? Why suddenly the shift?
Well, I don't know that there was a shift. I mean, you started by trying to portray that as a partisan thing. I would point out that 8 of the 10 highest violent crime rates are red states. And if you take the reddest city in America, it's Oklahoma City, it has the same population as Portland, Oregon, and its murder rate is double that in Portland. Crime is a bad issue. I think the Democrats were more focused on the lawlessness coming out of the White House than they were on general lawlessness or the crime rate.
Well, that's a little bit of a jog. Americans see what's going on. This is now an issue of safety. What would you say, being from the West Coast, we know what's going on here on the East Coast, what's happened to Los Angeles and the nature of Los Angelinos responding to mayhem in general that's unfolding everywhere?
Well, the same thing is happening in all these Democratic cities, Los Angeles, Portland, and Seattle. And Austin, for you to bring up Oklahoma City, that's just you're trying to use smoke and mirrors. Let's be very clear. The Democrats during the convention didn't say one thing about the chaos in those cities. Why? Because they're basically supporting Black Lives Matter. Austin, Black Lives Matter? Which Black lives? Black when there's a police officer, or is there a black-on-black crime in Chicago? Or what about the police officer, David Dorn? For Austin to come in here and talk about Oklahoma City and not talk about the chaos. The Democrats cannot talk about crime in these cities because they're run by Democratic mayors. And the thing that's so amazing about it, they play the race card throughout that entire convention. Isn't it amazing, Austin? And I hope you answer my question, is that Chicago is run by black people, black police chiefs, and they call racism. So all the Democratic convention trying to do is talk about racism in Democratic cities and ignore the crime in Democratic cities. One last point. President Trump offered help to these Democratic cities, but Austin didn't want anything to do with it. Austin, answer my question. Let's not talk about Oklahoma. Talk about Chicago, Seattle, and Washington. Please.
Austin, go for it. What do you have to say?
I still don't see how you get away from the fact that 8 of the 10 most violent crime states in the country are red states. That is a problem that we must. That is a problem that we must address across partisan lines. Now, in Portland, the president sent in federal agents and caused violent crime
to protect a federal building. 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 To protect a federal building.
It wasn't just to protect a federal building. That was the problem.
Answer a question.
Leo and Austin, gentlemen.
I'm not
Leo,
playing
I beg your pardon. Just a minute. No, just gentlemen, thank you very much. Bottom line is, when the federal agents were withdrawn, the violence continued, and it continued against local law enforcement, completely debunking the myth that the federal agents were somehow responsible for the violence in Portland.
Will the vote for Trump? Yeah, he's a man. 45th president has got a plan, but don't you try to sell me a lefty fake news. You can't do anything but be left fake ass news. I watch CNN, he's on his case. They slander his name all over the place. They say anything, but never the truth. The lefties really have no clue, so don't you tell me any more fake news.
Are we going to be able to look at the media, and is there going to be any point where we can take them seriously going into the RNC next week?
You heard the president say it today, and I think it was just such a poignant line where Joe Biden sees American darkness, he sees American greatness, and that's just a little bit of a look ahead of the message that you always hear from President Trump, but you'll certainly hear from him coming up next week as he re-accepts the nomination to lead the Republican Party and America for 4 more years. The contrast is clear. Joe Biden took a dark and divisive tone, and it was really hard to tell where the media ends and Democrats begin with all of their tripping over themselves, applauding the bare minimum participation trophy effort that Joe Biden gave, reading a teleprompter speech. Congratulations, Joe, you managed to do it. But let's look at the facts here. He was dark and he was dismissive, and he didn't talk about what's actually going on in this country, the greatness achieved under President Trump. He had to try to veil that. He couldn't even respect the office. He called him the occupant of the office. Hey, friendly reminder, Joe, there's a big difference between you and President Donald J. Trump, and it's not just the fact that the president is Donald J. Trump as a direct rebuke of the Obama-Biden administration. It's that America has great leadership with President Trump, something Joe Biden has never done in his 47 years in the swamp.
I am your voice.